Hey folks, I'm Sam Luce. Thanks for checking the video out. Now, I am a Logic Pro user. I am a podcast editor. I edit a lot of podcasts and I use Logic Pro a lot. I edit my podcast in Logic Pro. Here's a few tips for getting you to navigate Logic a little bit easier when you're editing podcasts. There are a load of fantastic features within Logic Pro that allow you to edit these podcasts really easily. Some are easily available, some you have to assign in preset menus, all that kind of stuff. We're going to take a look at all of them now and hopefully get you editing faster. Let's jump in. So the first thing that I really want to take a look at is ripple editing. It's called ripple editing in most other DAWs. It's not called it in Logic and it's not easily accessible, but here's what we do. The idea of a ripple edit is that when we say delete this piece of audio here, all this audio will shunt up and it will move back. So typically when we delete a piece of audio, if we delete all these two channels at once, it goes like that. Then we have to select all these channels and move them back, which is not ideal. First of all, it doesn't allow you to get anything that's off screen, but we can kind of circumnavigate that by pressing Shift and F, which is going to select all of the following. So you can see at the moment, if I select these two regions, we've just got two selected. If I press Shift and F, then we've got three selected. That's not actually the first tip, that's just like a bonus tip. But we can then move those ones backwards. It's still a little bit laborious, even with that magic Shift F. Here's what we do to enable ripple editing. We're going to go up to Logic Pro, up to Key Commands, and then to Edit. Now there's a few that we're going to edit in here, but I'm going to do them one by one just so that we can kind of see why we're doing it first and then what we're actually doing. Now if you type in the search key command up the top, delete, then you'll see delete and move. This may be assigned at the moment in yours, it may not be. I don't think by default it is actually assigned, but I've got this set to Shift and Backspace. And this is essentially the same as a ripple edit. So check that out, Shift and Backspace. If you haven't got it assigned at the moment, go Learn by Key Label and press Shift and Backspace and it will assign it for you. Super easy. Then you can close that down. To get this marquee tool to select, I'm just using my second function here by pressing Command. I'm drawing a box around the section I want to delete. Instead of just pressing Backspace, I'm going to press Shift and Backspace. Shift, Backspace. And it's ripple deleted that as well. Now it's only going to do things on the same channels as you've just ripple deleted on. So for example, if I do it on just this top channel, I'm going to select just that bit and then press Shift and Backspace. Well, it's just going to move the top channel. But in podcasts, it's really important to retain that sync. So I'm doing it across both of the microphone channels. You can do it across all of the channels if you really want to, if you've got some stuff at the end which is in a good spot and you want to retain that kind of relative positioning. But that's how we do it. We're going to select the selection that we want to get rid of by holding down Command and using the marquee tool, select all the channels that we want, and then that newly assigned shortcut on Shift and Backspace is Ripple Edit. That's one of my favorites. It's going to save you a lot of time, but this next one is probably going to save you even more time across the entirety of your session. So this has to do with varispeed, and I've got varispeed up the top here. What varispeed is, for those of you who aren't aware, is you can play back or you can record at a different speed than the original. So here I've got it selected as plus 30%. That means that playback is going to happen 30% faster than the original 100, so it's going to be 130%. This means that I can listen through to the entire podcast, but it's going to be a little bit shorter. I'm not going to have to listen to the entirety of the whole thing. It's going to speed it up a little bit, which is great for when you're working on extremely long podcasts or maybe a lot of podcasts in one day. It helps you to shave off a little bit of the time. I'll show you how to access that now. I'm going to go up the top and we're going to just control click, not on these icons here, but just below these icons. That's where I tend to do it. So control click, customize, control bar and display. And here we can customize all the stuff that comes up the top here. So what I typically like to have is what I've got here. This is a custom display. I've got my time display, varispeed, my tempo, etc. If you haven't got varispeed selected, you need to select that now. And then it's going to bring up varispeed here. But currently it's not turned on. So I've got a shortcut for that as well. My shortcut, you may want to do something different, is Control, Alt, Command and V. And that means that it just turns varispeed on for me. You can also turn it on just up here, but it's handy for me to just have it as a shortcut. I like to have everything as a shortcut when I'm editing podcasts. It makes things so much easier, so much quicker. It just makes the whole thing a dream. So you can create that in exactly the same way as we did before. We'll go up to Logic Pro, Key Commands, Edit, and then you can just type in varispeed. and toggle varispeed. So I've got that set to the one that I want. It's got a touch bar assignment as well for anyone who's got one of those laptops. You can set that to whatever you want. I like to have it as Control Option Command V. Kind of just makes sense to me. You can have it as whatever you want, but that's going to speed up the process of listening through to your audio. What I've found is that 130%, as in plus 30%, is about the limit that you can get where you can still hear everything and still be objective about your edits. If you're going up to 200% or even 150, then it gets a little bit garbled. You can't quite be objective. 130% is about right for me. Anything more than that, not quite so good, but it means that I can still hear everything. I can still maintain kind of the relative pace of everything. And most importantly of all, make edits quicker. Now, the next one that's going to save you a lot of time across the course of working on repeated episodes is working on project templates. This is built from a template. All the podcasts that I edit, typically after the first episode that I edit, are built from templates. There's a couple of ways that we can do this. I want to do this in the simplest way that I know how, the way that I have created my templates in the past. Now, the thing with creating templates is that it saves everything. If I just go up to File and then Save as Template, it's going to allow me to save it into project templates, but it's not going to give me the option to say, okay, save everything but the audio files, save everything but these specific audio files. Because in the instance of this, I actually want to keep some of the audio files. I want to keep the intro music, the outro music. I want to keep the mid-episode break, but I don't want to keep these. So here's what I do. This is the kind of the easiest way of doing things. If we go over to our browsers on the right-hand side, then we'll see in this project, we've got some audio files. So if I bring this across, these two here are the actual podcast, like the presenters, and these ones here are the intro, mid-tro, and outro music. These are the ones I want to keep. These ones I don't want to keep. So I can just get rid of these in the arrange window, or I can just get rid of these here, and that's going to get rid of them completely. Importantly, when I actually save the template, if they're in here, then it means that they're going to be saved to the template. I don't want that. So you want to make sure that they're removed here. So now I've got everything to the point where it's in a savable state. I've got the intro and outro and mid-tro music. I've got them all in the right place, approximately. It's going to change episode to episode. Importantly, I've got all my processing on these channels. I've got my busing set up. More on busing in a second. And I can save this. So it's also going to save all my, my varispeed stuff, all my options, all my customized control bar, etc. So I'm going to go up to File and then Save as Template. And it's going to save it in your project templates. This is the one that I'm working from at the moment, Lubber's Hole. So if I just call this LH, Lubber's Hole, with audio, and then save that, what I'm going to do now is just quit this one. I don't need to save the actual project. We'll go File, New from Template, and then you can see LH with audio. And we're just going to open that up. And hey presto, there it is. This is going to make things so much easier when you're working from one episode to another of the same podcast, maybe your own podcast, maybe something that you edit for someone else. It's just going to really quicken things up and make it so you don't have to create the same signal chains every time, import all the intro, outro music, all that kind of stuff that is really important, you have to do. This just automates the process for you. Really handy. So for this next one, we're talking about setting up some buses and getting it so that a voice can be heard over the top of an audio bed, something like that. And the process is typically called ducking because it ducks the music out the way when the voice is present. We can set it up really easily in Logic. Here's how we do it. So I have to say this is in a certain section where they are kind of advertising their Patreon page. I'm not trying to get people to go to their Patreon page. You can go there if you want. It doesn't really make a lot of difference to me. But it's just a really good example of when this is actually kind of present because I've got a voice over the top of an audio track. So I just want to say that now. It's not an advert. It's just a good place for me to actually show it. But I'm sure some people will tell me it's an advert, which it isn't. So here's what I'm doing then. I'm sending this one, the Patreon break message, again, not an advert, is going to a bus. And here it's called drums. Can't be bothered to tell you why. I've just labelled it as drums. And that's just send number 1, basically. And you can see that it's set up as send number 1, drums, and then music SC. So that's music sidechain. So on the music, I've then got a compressor. And you can see it's got a little arrow on the side of it. And that is because it has got the sidechain of bus number 1. So the audio from that mid-episode break, not advert, is going to the main output, but then it's also going through a bus into this compressor. And you'll see that when the compressor is actually there just normally, it's not active. It's not actually doing anything like for most of the time. So if there's no voice, It's not doing anything. But as soon as I put it to a section where there's actually a voice, where there's actually audio, you're going to see this little needle start moving.
Come and join our supporters on Patreon. Go to patreon.com.
I'm not going to show you what the link is because then it's not an advert, is it? So what's happening is it's just feeding into the sidechain of that compressor, and it's just saying, right, when there is audio in this sidechain, I want you to compress the music. If there's no signal present in the sidechain, then it's not going to compress, but when there is, it's going to compress. I'm going to show you that signal chain one more time, just to make it completely clear, because there's one important difference, one important thing that you need to change. So let's close that compressor. So on the audio of the voice that you want to be heard over the top of the music, send that to a bus and send that to whichever one you want, and here it's called music sidechain. And then you put a compressor on the music, compressor just there, and have the sidechain be bus number 1, the bus that the voice is being sent to. But what we don't want is for that music sidechain bus to come out of the main output. It's not actually going to the main output. We don't want it to, because otherwise we're then going to have like double the sound of the voice. If you listen to how it sounds at the moment,
Join our supporters on Patreon.
and then if I send that to the the main output,
Go to patreon.com
it's doubling the output. Take that out.
/Lubbers Hole.
Because we're sending it to a bus, which is then going to the output. The bus is only being used to actually affect that compressor. It's not going to the main output. So don't send it to the main output. But what that means then is that whenever there is voice present over the top of this music, it's going to be
For
compressed.
enjoying the podcast, please come and join our supporters on Patreon.
And then when we get to the end, there's no voice present, so it's not compressing. That is just going to allow you to get the voice to be heard over the top of the music. And the amount that you compress the music by is dependent on 2 controls. The first is the threshold. So it's essentially the point at which it starts compressing. If you bring this down, then it's going to compress more. Bring it up towards 0, it's going to compress less. And another way of controlling it is to go to the voice channel and change this amount. If you have it down low, it's not going into the compressor as much, so it's not going to compress as much. If you have it up super loud, then it's going to compress absolutely loads because it's sending loads into the compressor. That's a super easy way of making it so that your voice can be heard over the top of music, and it's kind of a mainstay in podcasting, radio, etc. It's called ducking. That's how you do it. This next one I found by mistake, but it's actually really effective and really easy. Now, the reason I found it by mistake is because, as I said, I'm shortcut master. Not a master, I just love them. I like shortcuts. If the less I can use the mouse, the better, really. But I use different applications. So I use Logic, I use Pro Tools, Cubase, I use Isotope RX, Premiere. Shortcuts can get really confusing sometimes. You're always using one in the wrong application. And this is what happened here. So in Premiere Pro, if you don't know, the way that you export something is you select everything that you want to export, and then if you press the slash key, the one next to the shift on the right hand side of the keyboard, it will put some markers around everything that you've selected. And I pressed that by accident once because I was in Premiere Pro mode on Logic, and it brought up a little window, and I wasn't sure what it was. It looks like this, and it's go to position. Now you might think, well, okay, that's an easy way of going to a position, but how does that apply to a podcast? Well, the reason this applies to a podcast is because often what I do is I'll send a proof copy. So I'll do my first edit, then I'll send it away, and then they'll send me some notes, and they'll say, oh, okay, at 21 minutes, there's a little cough. Could you please get rid of that cough? And the thing that I need to do is then go into it and find 21 minutes and then dig out the cough. But this is an easy way of doing things because you can just press that slash. I think it's a forward slash, or is it a backslash? I don't know. The one that kind of starts in the bottom left and goes up to the top right. I should have worked that out before I did this video, shouldn't I? But I haven't. So you press that button anyway, whatever it's called, the slash, and it comes up with go to position, and you can tell it to go to whichever position in the session that you want. So if I press tab, at the moment we're in bars, and I'm just going to go over to my time display. So this is relative to what's up here, essentially. So at the moment I'm at 54 minutes and 20 seconds. It starts off with a 1 at the beginning. I'm not going to get into that right now. But I want to go to 20. Okay, so up here, it's this first one is kind of the offset, and then this is the minutes, This is the seconds, and then we have a load of like sub-seconds, I guess milliseconds or whatever, frames after that. So I'm just going to zoom out on absolutely everything. I'm going to do that by pressing Command and A and then Z. That's going to zoom out on everything. Bring the slash up again. What I want to do is go to 21 minutes. So at the moment I'm in bars and beats. I'm going to press the tab key to go across to my minutes and seconds. I want to go to 21 minutes. Okay, so these are the seconds here, and then I want to go to 21. So this one here is kind of the offset, I guess you could say. And then this is the minutes, this is the seconds, milliseconds and frames over here. So at 21, when I press enter, it's going to go to 21. If I was zoomed in a little bit further, then I would be able to go to something else and it would take me there. So let's say we don't want to go to 21 anymore. We want to go to 45 minutes and 20 seconds. And then press enter. And it's going to take me there. It's an easy way when you've got a long session, a long podcast. This one, I think, comes up somewhere near 2 hours. Yeah, 1 hour and 20 minutes. Remember, there's the offset there. So it's quite a big session for me to actually navigate. If I was kind of zooming in on a little piece where I wanted to do some edits, okay, I've done that. Where do I want to go next? 20 minutes. Right, well, I've got to zoom back out and then come back all the way over here. Where is it? 20 minutes. I've got to zoom back in again. It's nonsense. I don't want to be doing that. If I'm at 20 minutes, for example, I can just press my backslash and then I can say, right, I need to go to 50 minutes now. Let's go to 50 minutes and it's at 33 seconds. Bang, there you go, you're at 50 minutes and 33 seconds. One that I found out by accident, but ever since I found it out, I've used it on every single edit. Every single time I've got to do a bit of a re-edit or a recall or whatever you want to call it, go to a certain position, just make that edit and then go from there. Super handy, and it, again, saves you some time. Thanks so much for watching, folks. These are all tips that are really designed to save you time. In podcasting, in podcast editing, time is money. If you're charging people to edit podcasts, then it's going to save you time, which is effectively making you money. You can do more in a shorter space of time. If you're editing your own podcast, then it's less time spent on that actual podcast edit, so it's saving you money overall. I think that's really important. I think these tips are effective for saving you time and saving you money. If you've got any tips that are really effective for podcast editing, I'd love to hear them down in the comments because they could be useful for me as well. I don't know everything about Logic Pro. There's so much there. It's impossible for one person to know absolutely everything. I'd love to hear what you use and what is the most effective in your workflow. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you again soon. Take care.